What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another week of NFL picks, and what a crazy week it was last week. All the upsets that happened, a lot of statement games. Obviously, the big one last night from the Jaguars upsetting the Chiefs, the Patriots upsetting the Bills, the 49ers upsetting the Rams, that great game in Seattle between Tampa and the Seahawks. And it was an amazing week last week. It was a very weird week, but sometimes that is what makes great football and great entertainment. So, let's get right into it. And last week, as I said, it was a very weird week. It was an upset week around the league. So obviously didn't do well last week, but sometimes it happens. Um, so you just got to bounce back. There are two teams on a bye week this week. The first being the Houston Texans, coming off two straight wins. They look to be trying to get things in the right direction. Obviously, Baltimore's a very beaten up team, but nonetheless, that is a hurdle that the Texans have been trying to overcome for the past several years, and they were really finally able to get over it. It really doesn't matter how you do it. You know they're gonna take pride in that. And then the Minnesota Vikings. And it's been an up and down season for them too, but they're 3-2. They're early on, still in it. So let's move right into this week's games, and the first one being Thursday Night Football in the Meadowlands, the Eagles and the Giants NFC East matchup, and Philly coming off their first loss, so they're looking to bounce back. I don't know if Saquon Barkley is going to play, and I do think that if Saquon doesn't play, that does change this game in many ways. But I still think that the Giants. I think that's a team that I just don't think they're ready to beat Philly yet. I think Philly's going to bounce back here. I think they're going to get a win. Next, the Broncos, the Jets in London. The Jets are the only NFL team without a without a win. We have no teams remaining without a loss, but we only have one team remaining without a win. That's the New York Jets. Um, and hosting the Broncos here in London. Denver's obviously coming off of themselves a very big win versus Philadelphia, and you know I say this, when you come off these big wins, it can absolutely lead you into trap games. It can lead you into letdown spots, and you can't let that happen. And Sean Payton's a pretty good coach, so I don't think he's going to let it happen. Now, I do think the game might be closer than a lot anticipate, because that's just always how it kind of is with these international games. But in the end, I am going to pick the Broncos to win. Next, the Seattle Seahawks, Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, I think the Jaguars season in its entirety takes on a whole new meaning after that win versus Kansas City. They're 4-1. Everyone's been talking about the Colts, but now they're right there with Indy in that division. And it really looks like that's who this division is going to come down to in the AFC South, between those two teams. Seattle coming off of a loss to Tampa at home, and now obviously they're looking to bounce back. And once again, I think this could be a letdown spot for Jacksonville. We're going to, I think, see now how well the Jaguars are able to maintain focus coming off of a big win. But I'm gonna pick Jacksonville here. I just think that you got to give them some respect following that win, and also I just feel like Sam Darnold has, he's been having he's had a very good start. It feels like he's gonna have that letdown game eventually. This is a game Seattle may have a chance to win, But in the end, you're having to go all across the country, and that Jaguars team, that stadium's going to be rocking on Sunday probably. So I'm gonna give it to Jacksonville. I think they improved to 5-1. Next, Chargers Dolphins. Obviously, the Chargers start 3-0. They lose their last two. Miami blew a 17-0 lead in Carolina. And I really feel like at this point, Mike McDaniel has to be in the running for one of the first coaches that ends up getting fired. I think he has to be in the running for it. Um, and I think it just comes down to, in this game, the better coach team, and that is the Chargers. So I'm going to go ahead, going to pick the Chargers to win. Next, the Rams at the Ravens. Now, I think this game, with all the injuries Baltimore has, it's obviously really does shift. Just like I think we saw in that Houston game. I think if Lamar Jackson was playing and they had all their guys, this could be a very different outcome. But, at the end of the day, the Rams, they're looking to bounce back. I think that, at the end of the day, that Baltimore team is just, they're not playing like a Baltimore team. Their defense is the worst in the NFL. Obviously, we see that their offense without Lamar Jackson is a completely different offense. And, especially if Lamar's out this week, it's just it's going to be tough. So I think the Rams are going to pick up a victory. I think they're going to get another win. I think Baltimore's going to drop to 1-5. I don't think any of us would have imagined this scenario at all. We would have maybe thought Baltimore goes to 5-1 after this, but every year you get a team that's ravaged by injuries, and it feels like this year it's going to be the Ravens. Next, the Cardinals, Colts, and it really feels like Arizona. I mean, I was just talking about McDaniel. Jonathan Gannon may also, if the Cardinal season really falls apart here, he might be the next coach that ends up, you know, getting fired. He may be the first one gone this season if they continue to collapse. And their season right now, it really feels like is teetering right on a cliff. And meanwhile, for the Colts, their season could not be going any better right now. They're 4-1. They could very well be 5-0. They're gonna be at home for this game. And at the end of the day, I think you got to go with the team who has the momentum, and that's Indianapolis. So I'm gonna pick the Colts to win. Next, Dallas at Carolina, and both teams coming off a win. The Panthers have not beaten the Cowboys at home the past several years. They've had an opportunity to. I think for the Panthers, this is going to be a game. We have seen that if the Panthers want to win these football games, they're going to have to do it through their running game. That is how I think Bryce Young is at his best. That's where I think Carolina is at their best. You got to do it through your running game. But at the end of the day, it just feels like another Dallas spot where they come in and they beat an inferior opponent, and I think that's what's going to happen here. I think the Cowboys score some points. I think they topple the Panthers. I don't see them, if they get a 17-0 lead, blowing it like the Dolphins do. So give me the Cowboys. Dak has been having a great year so far. It's not really talked about because Dallas is obviously not one of the best teams in the league, but a win here gets them over 500, and probably starts to get them in some playoff conversations if they can keep it up. Next, the Patriots at the New Orleans Saints. New England, I mean, I think the question is who had the biggest statement win in week 5. New England, has a great case for it. You talk about making a statement, telling the entire world that you have your quarterback finally after the past few years of it being a carousel. Mike Vrabel obviously establishing an identity, and the Saints coming off their first win, but they're nowhere near where I think the Patriots are at right now. So give me New England to win. I think New England wins this. They pick up another victory. Next, the Browns at the Steelers, and obviously, Pittsburgh is in a very good position in that division with all Baltimore's injuries, Joe Burrow being out for Cincinnati, and of course, we all know that the Browns really weren't going to contend for this division in the first place. But it seems like a game that the Browns they're going to keep close, and I think that's what's going to happen. But in the end, I do think Pittsburgh comes out on top with the victory and goes to 4-1. But I think the Browns could keep it close here for the most part. Next, moving into the late window, the Titans coming off their first win of the season, staying out west, going to Vegas to take on the Raiders, and a really kind of, not too much going on in this game. If I'll say this, if Cam Ward could get another victory, that would definitely be nice for that Tennessee team. But it just feels like for the Raiders, eventually I don't think they were gonna have a lot of victories this year, but they are gonna have some. I feel like this is an opportunity for them to pick up one of those victories here. Maybe a close game, but in the end, Vegas, Ashton Gency has been very impressive so far for that offense. They pick up a win. Next, a battle of two 4-1 teams. Really a monstrous matchup in the NFC. San Francisco and Tampa Bay. And look, I think one thing you got to recognize about the Buccaneers is no matter the week, they don't die. They are, I think, maybe truly the one of the only teams in the NFL that you can really say it's just so damn tough to ever count them out. But San Francisco, they've gotten off to a very impressive 4-1 start. Really, I think led by that defense. And here's one thing I will say about Tampa. A lot of these games could go either way. And of course, good teams find a way to win those types of games, and that's what Tampa is a good team. But you're not going to win every game like that. You're not good. You're not going to win every single one score game. You're going to have a few that you turn up on the wrong side of the coin on. And it really feels like Tampa Bay has that one game every single year that, kind of is a letdown, really at this point when they are starting to get super hot. And I think that's going to be here. I think San Francisco, I don't know how many people are going to think they'll win in Tampa. I think the Buccaneers will probably be favorites, but I think San Francisco's going to go in there and I think they're going to get a victory and, come out of this thing 5-1. Next, the Bengals at the Packers. In this game, I want to talk about another game with a completely different meaning due to the injuries, particularly with Joe Burrow. And I think it's pretty obvious that the Bengals, they need Burrow out there. That is their only chance to win. Um, and you're having to go into Lambeau Field. It's it's going to be tough. And I see the Packers honestly being able to roll in this game. I don't think Cincinnati is going to really pose much of a threat. Now, Sunday night football in Kansas City. The Lions at the Chiefs, and obviously it's going to be a very fun game between. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I do think despite the loss, we saw that Kansas City offense really come to life in a way we hadn't seen in several years. Because I think we've all known this. The Chiefs have really been, for years, have turned into really just wear you down, control time of possession, and win with that defense. But it felt like last night in Jacksonville, they were ready for a shootout, and ultimately they came up short. But we did see that offense really come to life, and it being an Arrowhead, the Chiefs they do need a win. Um, I'm gonna pick the Chiefs here. I think it's gonna be a very very close game, but I think Kansas City comes out on top and gets to 500. two Monday Night Football games. The first one being the Buffalo Bills and the Atlanta Falcons. And y'all know this has been a very tough game for me to pick. I think there is absolutely a scenario the Falcons could win this game. I do. Of course, you all know I talk about it later in the week. But I think the number one, there's just some concerns I have about the Falcons' ability. And I will say this would absolutely be an amazing statement game. I mean, this would be a signature win, and a win that could really ignite a fire coming out of the bye week in so many ways if you're able to beat this Bills team. But in the end, I do have to pick Buffalo here. I just think that it's going to be a situation of the Bills they're more accustomed to these types of games, and they're also coming off a loss. I think if maybe Buffalo wins, it's a different conversation, but also they're going to be looking for their bounce back week. They're going to be looking to avoid a loss heading into their bye. So I'm going to pick the Bills to win here. And then final game of the week, the Bears at Commanders, rematch of that game last year, obviously with the Hail Mary at the end. And Chicago is coming off this bye. They had two wins going in before it. Washington, they're getting back on track with Daniels at quarterback. And we saw that against the Chargers. And I think it's going to be a close game, but in the end, give me Washington. I think they come out on top. I think that at the end of the day, Jaden Daniels at home in prime time. That's just something that it's a tough task to beat. It is, but at the end of the day, I am gonna pick Washington. So appreciate you all for watching. Remember to like, remember to subscribe, remember to share it out. I will see you all in the next one.